Hi, I'm Geis. Welcome back to week 17 in the God Success Secrets video series. This week's success secret says, flee and pursue. Have any of you read a diet book lately? I was reading one the other day, and I have to tell you, one of my frustrations with diet books is most of them start out by telling you all the things that you can no longer eat. And they're usually some of the things that I like to eat. For example, bananas. I just read this diet book, not supposed to eat bananas. Too much sugar in bananas. And here I was taught in school that bananas were good for you. They had lots of potassium, but I guess they're not so good for you anymore. Another thing I had to cross off my list. Potatoes. I love potatoes. And I used to think I was eating really healthy if I had a baked potato for dinner. But now I hear I'm not supposed to eat these potatoes. They pack on the pounds. So that was another food I had to cut out. What about this one? This is my big box of old-fashioned oats. I love a bowl of oatmeal in the morning, which I guess the oatmeal is okay, they say, unless I'm trying to cut down on carbs. But I like to sprinkle some brown sugar on my oatmeal. Well, of course, that is a no-no. All these diet books, no white flour, no sugars, no preservatives. And by the time they finish telling you everything you can't eat, you wonder, what in the world am I supposed to eat? Well, thankfully, God has not written a diet book. And if He did, He would do it so much differently. See, in God's Word, when He asks us to give up something, He tells us what we need to put in its place. Listen to our verse this week and listen for the words flee and pursue. In 2 Timothy 2:22, God says, flee the evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. So He says you're supposed to flee from these evil desires, but don't just flee from those. I want to tell you what I want you to pursue. So if God was writing a diet book, His would start with, these are all the things you can eat. These are all the things I want you to pursue, that I want you to put into your diet, instead of giving us a long list of things we're supposed to cut out. Now recently, God has been working with me on cutting a few things out of my life. And one of those things, this may sound so silly to you, but when I'm in the car, I have 6 kids, and I'm driving them to soccer practice and swim practice and piano lessons and dance lessons. So I'm in the car a lot in the afternoons. So a few years ago, I got into the habit of getting books on tape that they're on CD. I'd put them in my car and listen to those when I'm driving my kids all around, or especially if I'm in the car by myself. And recently, God has been prompting me to give that up. I need to flee from that. And as I was talking to him, why do I need to flee from that? I was trying to not listen to the radio, not listen to anything that might be bad for me, like some people say not to listen to the news or whatever. I thought, books on tape. And I choose good quality books that I'm listening to on tape. And sometimes I even listen to college professors give some lectures on different things. I've learned about Napoleon, and I've learned all about Venice, and I've learned about Shakespeare's romantic comedies in my car, and that's something I really enjoy. But God told me one day, He said, you know that time in the car, that's time you could spend talking to me. So instead of pursuing all the enjoyment that you get out of these books on tape, I want you to pursue me instead. This would be a good time for us to get together while you're in the car. So He told me what I needed to flee from, and He told me what I need to pursue. So I want you to think in your life, what are some of the things that you feel like, I need to flee from these things. These things are holding me back. It might be a character trait, it might be a habit that you have, but what are some of those things that if God were talking to you one-on-one, you know that he would probably say, you know, you really need to flee from that. I have a few examples here. Selfishness. God might say, you're being a little too selfish sometimes. But God doesn't just leave you there. He says, instead of being selfish, let's go for the opposite. Practice generosity. So if you're going to flee selfishness, then you need to pursue generosity. What about if you have a problem with foul language? Now, this has not been a big problem for me. When I was a little girl, my best friend and I were at this playground, and we thought we were the only two on the playground, and we decided to shout out every bad word we had ever heard. And we were shouting these at the top of our lungs. Little did we know that my mother was in the range where she could hear us. And I remember her stomping over to the playground, taking us both by our ears right to the kitchen sink and washing our mouths out with soap. Now, I always say she got the worst end of the deal because she had braces and I did not. So the soap in the braces was really bad. But foul language has not been one of my issues, but for some people it is. So what if that's one of your issues? How can you flee from that foul language? Well, think of what's the opposite of foul language. The opposite would be encouraging language, language that builds people up. I read a story to my two youngest sons the other day about this little boy, and he was got in trouble for saying a bad word. And his dad encouraged him to make up a word that he could use instead of the bad word. So it was something like schmats, something like that. When he would get mad, he would say schmats instead of shouting out a curse word. So maybe you could come up with some entirely new creation of a word in order to avoid foul language. Let me think if I have another one here. Oh, we've already talked about in an earlier video about being late. If you want to flee from that habit of being late, then you need to pursue being early, being on time. So God doesn't ask us to look at all the negative things that we need to get rid of in our lives. He says if you pursue these good things, those bad things won't be a problem for you anymore. So this week, in your journal, take out that journal, and if you don't have one, remember you can get a free one if you log on to www.godsuccesssecrets.com and choose one trait or habit that you feel is holding you back from success, that you really struggle with. And it's one of those things that you keep telling yourself, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't do this. And you've been focusing on fleeing from that thing. And this week, I want you to turn it around. And how can you, instead of fleeing, pursue the opposite of that thing? So just think about what is the opposite and how can I pursue that? And focus on the pursuit, not on the fleeing, and you will find success. So get out your journal, write down that thing that you are going to pursue this week, and let me know how it goes. Let me know if taking that focus off the fleeing really helps. And if you find a good diet book that will still let me eat some of my favorite foods, pass that along to me also. I'll see you next time.